Hi, welcome to my stream. I'm going to do something kind of crazy today, and well, crazy for me. And I'm going to stream both to YouTube live and also to Instagram live. So let me just. Okay, now I'm streaming on both Instagram and YouTube. Folks on Instagram, if you, it's slightly different perception or a slightly different camera angle because I'm having to use my phone for Instagram and my laptop with attached camera accoutrements for the YouTube stream. So if you're joining me on Instagram and you don't like the view because it's kind of oblique, just go to my bio and check out the link that will send you to YouTube, and you'll be able to watch this exact same stream. So today, I have a surprise for everyone. It was unexpected. I didn't mean to finish this hat without you all, but I have. And see, a friend of mine from way back, I think we've been friends. The last time I spoke to any of these women was maybe 20 years ago. If you're old enough to remember what Usenet is, we were friends on a Usenet news group back in the 90s. And anyway, one of the women that I knew from that group hosted a sort of a reunion style crafternoon event this past weekend that I attended, and everyone was working on different things. One woman was crocheting, another one was making jewelry, and I was working on this hat because it's needs to get finished for the charity auction. And let me take it off of Zelda to sort of walk you through what I did to finish it. I had originally planned to be finishing this hat today during the live stream, but that didn't happen. I finished it early. Even so, because I conduct this stream in part to provide my students with the opportunity to watch me make millinery decisions in the studio as I'm producing hats, which I'm unable to do on site at the theater because of the pandemic. I do want to, before I start working on a project, talk you through what I did in the intervening time since the last stream to finish this hat. So recollect that this is one of two hats that I am making for a charity auction fundraiser for a local nonprofit, the Crepe Myrtle Festival. And in the course, if you've watched this stream from the beginning, you've seen this hat go through several transformations in terms of the trim. Like the base structure of this silver straw asymmetrical top hat has always remained the same. And that's something that we talk about in my millinery class is how you make the hat and then how you trim the hat. And the way that you choose to apply trim to the hat is infinite possibilities. So the first step is to come up with what the shape is and then how to decorate it. And so when I began these live streams, I had this shape already blocked into this asymmetrical top hat. And the first couple of streams, what I did was pin out trims on it in different configurations because I like to pin out some trims and then leave it on a model or a head form in my studio for a couple of days to really sort of gel and come to an opinion about whether I think it's trimmed out beautifully or not. And I went through 2 iterations and finally settled on this one. Had it pinned out for a week, decided to finish it, and by the time we ended last stream, I had secured only some of the trim, starting up here at the peak of the crown, the highest point. I'd secured all of this decor of these little wool pom-poms, this ribbon decor, and this fabric flower from M&S Schmalberg handmade fabric flower trim. But I had not begun moving down this, not really a hat band because it doesn't completely encircle it at the join to the crown to the brim, but this ribbon decor that spirals around the crown and then across the brim and underneath. So I do want to talk about what I did to secure that, because it was not a case of stitching in a line on one or both sides of this ribbon all the way down. When I first began learning millinery and was an apprentice, one of my mentors, I can't even remember who it was at this time, but said that you don't want to really nail the trim onto the hat super securely, that it should look like it was, that you don't really know what's keeping it there, that it's just delicately placed on the hat and just sitting there by the magic of who knows what circumstance. And as such, that wish I could remember who it was, but the milliner that was imparting this advice to me was saying you don't want to stitch it on securely as you would trim on a dress. Like if you're applying this ribbon around, say, the cuffs of a jacket or a gown, you would want to slip stitch it or back stitch it, even depending on the action that's required of the performer in the gown. You'd want it to be really secure. You want to make sure that it wasn't going to just accidentally rip off. But in most cases, now in the theater, there's always an exception, but in most cases, no one is trying to rip the trim off this hat. It's there, and it doesn't really need to be super nailed down. So, with that in mind, I always tell my students on a traditional hat band that if you want it to be secure, instead of slip stitching the whole band all the way around the hat, that you concentrate on the 4 quarters and you secure it at the center front and the center back and then both sides, and you just do a little tack stitch in all 4 of those places, and that's sufficient. Especially because in the theater and in life, if you've got a felt fedora, you're eventually going to want to have that renovated because you wear it and it becomes softer and floppier, and you want it to not be too much trouble for the hatter who's going to renovate it for you to take that band off, resize it, clean it, and then put the band back on. In the theater, where often, the hat may not even be dirty or damaged or need resizing, but you may need to just retrim it because you've pulled it for a new show and it's going to be used again, but this person would never wear a flowered hat. They would wear a feathered hat, or this character rather. So minimal amounts of stitching is what's my common practice. So this band is a little different because it spirals down and doesn't cross over itself. So I did, at the end of the last stream, I was just finishing up securing it up here underneath this flower configuration. And then I did my little tacking trick on the side. It's not a side seam here, but it's, the side quadrant, at the center back quadrant, at the other side, and then only here where it starts to come down the brim, fold up and go under here, tucking into this interior sweatband, did I really want to secure it more so than a little tack. So starting here where it departs from the crown and starts to swoop along the brim, there's a couple stitches up here at the join or at the bend of the crown to the brim. And then there's quite a lot of stitching securing across here at the brim edge, through and through, to really hold that ribbon down at this area, because how you wear this hat, or how I would wear this hat, I guess it's up to the buyer, whoever wins it in the auction, but I would choose to wear this hat like this. And that places that portion of trim that goes along the edge and back up under the brim. Like there's a potential for the wearer to touch it there, especially a contemporary wearer. Like I'm a milliner, and so I would choose to take this hat on and off like this. But the average contemporary hat wearer is more familiar with styles like caps with visors, baseball caps, flat caps, and is used to taking hats off like this. Even, this to me is a very masculine way of removing a hat, but people of all gender orientations in the contemporary world, their instinct is to take their hat off like this. And so that's why when I secured the trim here, I wanted to make sure I had it really well stitched at that fold that goes around the brim. And then you can probably see, I'm trying to show it to two different avenues here because I've got you all at the YouTube stream, and then you all on the Instagram stream to see the interior brim there. Oh, you know what? Oh, I'm missing a light. That's part of why you can't see inside of this so well. Hang on, I gotta cut it on. That's the charm of live streaming. You gotta improvise. Anyway, now I think you can see a lot better inside of here where that ribbon goes around the edge of the brim and then tucks back up under here and is secured underneath this interior grosgrain. So I had to, when I started trimming this out, it's the grosgrain was already secured inside of here, and I had already put that label into it that says La Bricoleuse right here. All of that was already done, and I realized once I figured out how I wanted to trim it that I would have to pop the stitches just in that short section of the interior sweatband in order to tuck this bit of trim up inside of there. So, if I peel this back, you can see the raw edge, the cut edge of that ribbon inside of there. At least I think you can. It's hard for me to tell because the light is a great light, but it's sort of blinding me in terms of seeing like what's on the screen. So forgive me if I'm not illustrating this well. So that is a quick overview of the stitching that was involved in the finishing of this hat that happened over the weekend, and I apologize for doing that on my own time. I have kind of fallen into sticking with stream-specific projects that I only work on here in this live stream situation, and not, which is not what I would do in an actual, if I were on staff at the theater working in the studio. Well, I am on staff at the theater, but if I were allowed to come into the building and safely work in the studio there, I wouldn't be sticking to a schedule of like only on Thursday afternoon will I work on the gray straw top hat. That would just be as I have time to work on it, I'm finishing it. So I think it would be more scattershot for my students and anybody that happened to come by and observe what I was working on. But I have tried to keep some consistency to this stream so that it's familiar projects and you see it get to a certain point and then you see it go on the next week, make progress on it. And so to that end, I apologize for basically finishing this hat at a sewing circle meeting this weekend. But at the same time, I still haven't heard back when they need these for the charity auction. So I was kind of feeling like I know what the deadline is on my Tim Burton art exhibit hat. I don't know what the deadline is on these guys. And I'm not saying that they're flaky, but I'm saying sometimes things get lost in the cracks and then you're like, oh crap, we need that stuff by Friday. And I would hate to feel pressure to finish it hastily instead of in a quality fashion. So, to recap what I did between last stream and this stream, where I ended it tacking all of this trim down, securing all of this floral and ribbon hat peak decor, was stitch just little tacks here, right near the flower, where it's secured up under there. Stitch a little bit of this. Then a tack at the side seam, at the center back, well, not the side seam, but the side mark. The left side, the right side, the right side, the left side, the center back, the right side, and then here at the front where it breaks from the crown to the brim, along the edge of the brim, and up into the interior sweatband. So if I don't want to stick my finger in there because I don't want to, destroy it, but if I stick my little snips in there, you can see that this is not sewn down. It's standing away from the hat. There's air there. And that was really, to go back to what I was saying about my millinery mentor who advised minimal securing of trim to hats, was that maintaining the ability for there to be air between elements of the hat was what that milliner considered to be quality finishing. So that sort of winds up this straw hat for the Crepe Myrtle Festival. I'm done with it. They can come get it at their leisure. And so now we can look at them together. I did photos that will show up on Instagram soon of these two hats on Zelda against a white background, so that they're like nice. I won't say professional because I took them and I'm not a professional photographer. But you can see these two hats. This is the winter style I'm donating, and this is the summer style I'm donating. And now they are completely finished and ready to go. So if you see these and you just love one of them and want to own it, then once I have a URL for the charity auction site, once they get that up, I will be posting it in the comments and so forth. Just in case you love one of these hats so much, it just must be yours. But let me put Zelda back on the table back here. All right, so that concludes that hat. And now, because I'm done with that job, commission, obligation, I'm moving back to the Tim Burton black and white striped wing situation. And I've taken all of the trim off of this since last week, when I think it was last week that I demonstrated a little bit how I was going to pin out more trim than just that giant red hydrangea. And so it's going to involve 2 ribbon ornaments, and I have prepared that ribbon. So recall that this is this 6-inch wide Mokuba ribbon. Since I'm broadcasting 2 places, I got to show it to both cameras. This is that really high-end ribbon that I got a great deal on in the Garment District a few years ago. And I've prepared 2 pieces that are going to turn into great big ribbon ornaments to go on this kind of a bicorne, like an asymmetrical bicorne fin. So if you look at how I've done that, it's cut at an angle on this end here, and part of that is for style, and part of that is to reduce fraying. If you cut it straight across, the weave of this is a satin face ribbon. If you cut it straight across, then it would fray and get fuzzy and gross, and that's not what I want to happen, especially on this end that's going to basically be a piece of decor on the hat. But on the other end, if you look at this and can see what's happening here, this end, because I need it to be a straight cut, I've cut it with pinking shears, and then before the stream I pressed it under. So there's a nice clean edge there and a pinked edge under there, so it won't have too much fraying. But now I can, manipulate this and create an ornament that will go onto this hat with all of my raw edges secured to the inside of that trim element. And I've prepared 2 of these because there's 2 sides. On either side of that flower, I need a big ribbon frou element. So, God, I'm so blind. I apologize for how much delay just happens in general because my eyesight is so bad. And it doesn't help, I guess, that this is a needle. All right, so now I need to choose a thread that matches this ribbon because I'm going to make these little, that's black. Choose a thread that matches this ribbon because I'm going to go ahead and make these ornaments and then hopefully get them stitched onto this hat by the end of this stream. That's 40 minutes away. That might happen. We'll see. I'm very slow at hand sewing, so it really may or may not happen. And this is a brand new spool of thread. It's not a perfect match, but it's the closest match that I have. And I think I can disguise where I stitch it. I think I can make my stitches small enough and hidden so that it doesn't, so the fact that it's not a perfect match is not the end of the world. So this spool of thread comes from back at the beginning of the pandemic when everybody that knew how to sew pretty much was manically sewing face masks from like their bed sheets and stuff. A woman that I am we follow each other on Twitter. I wouldn't say that we're friends per se. I mean, maybe we are. It's hard to guess with that sort of thing. Like, I started off following her because she had written a book that I enjoyed. But then it seems like we've discussed things in direct messages, and now we're Instagram friends as well. So maybe we're friends. I don't know. These are strange times. Anyway, I offered to make her a custom mask from digitally printed fabric at Spoonflower. She was going to send me this piece of artwork that she loves, and I was going to have it printed on cotton poplin and make her a mask, which, by the way, she still hasn't sent me that artwork. Alyssa, if you're watching this at any point ever, and now or in the future, and you want that mask, just get me the artwork. Turnaround times for Spoonflower art back to normal now. But so I said, yes, I can make you that mask. I just need the artwork. And she said that she wanted to give me something in exchange, or pay me, or compensate me for my labor, even though I was volunteering to do it for free, just because we're in the middle of a pandemic and you need masks in order to survive. Long story short, she sent me a 50 color set of these Gutermann threads, which if you are at all familiar with brands of thread, Gutermann is a very high quality brand of thread. And I think I had said something at the time about how I was running out of thread and I was sewing everything in these weird, just whatever color I had, a half a spool of rust brown, and so she sent me that as a thank you, and just, I guess, probably a morale boosting thing, because back there at the beginning of all this, I really was sewing 8 or 10 hours a day, cranking out masks as fast as I could. Because, at the time, you couldn't get them. Like, my partner's sister is a nurse and working at a nursing home in South Georgia, and she was freaking out because they did not have sufficient PPE to protect themselves. And so, I mean, I started by making a mask for Amy, Chris's sister, and it wasn't just one. I think I sent her like 40, because it was, here's masks for you and your whole entire team, and enough for you to be able to like actually launder them at the end of the day and not have to do laundry every single night if you get home from tending these people who may or may not have COVID. Anyway, those mask making days are gone now because there's plenty of cloth masks available. I mean, our local health department sent every household in our county a couple of cotton face masks, which, you know, I mean, they're just plain gray, but, and I'm not saying that it's useless to sew those masks now. There's definitely need, especially among migrant farm workers and some Native American reservations, and you know, there are plenty of populations that can use that stuff now, but completed masks can now be bought for far cheaper than someone like me can be paid to sew them. Or, you know, I don't have as much time to donate now because it's not summer vacation at the theater. Anyway, I'm going on and on about masks, and that's not remotely the topic of this stream. So I'm going to start, I've threaded up my needle, but I'm going to start by pinning this out into the shape that I think I want it to be. And so I've never been diagnosed as having any kind of spectrum disorder, but I am very particular. Things have to be a certain way or it drives me nutty. And that trips me up when it comes to millinery design, because I am instinctually drawn to symmetricality, even as I intellectually know that symmetricality is the hobgoblin of the milliner. Like, yeah, well, not necessarily. You know, there are circumstances in which you want to have symmetrical trim or a hat being worn in symmetrical fashion, but the fact is that, you know, it looks more natural and more sophisticated if you create your trim so that it's not symmetrical. And let me put the pin back in this, because it's a very good example of why you shouldn't do it this way, or at least, I mean, this is a matter of taste. But so can you see that ribbon there with a box pleat in it? That's my instinctual first manipulation of this trim, and that's not the trim that needs to go on this, you know, Tim Burton pirate tricorn situation that I have going on here. Let me move my water cup out of this area, because, I mean, I'm thirsty, but you guys don't need to have it in the way of seeing this ridiculous hat. Not ridiculous, this unusual hat. How about that? But in order for this hat to not wind up being ridiculous, I need to put trim on it that has a sense of sophistication to it, and this box pleat is not gonna do it for this ribbon. But what I think I can do is just do a double pleat going in the same direction, and that'll have a similar effect, but yet a more sophisticated. Ooh, maybe a triple one. Yeah, maybe I want it to be a triple pleat. I think I've said this in a prior stream already, but I find making trimming and decor decisions to be very challenging because I'm a theatrical milliner, and most of the time, like I will make the practical decisions of like, okay, I'm putting all of this ribbon on this hat and I have to, figure out how to pleat it up or loop it up, turn it into bows, faux bows, so forth. But on a macro scale, I almost never am dreaming up a hat out of the ether, with absolutely no guidance from a costume designer. And so that means that when I am creating something like this, I second guess every aesthetic decision that I make. And I think, so I've pinned this out, can you see, with a triple pleats going in all in the same direction, and that, to my eye at least, that looks a lot more sophisticated than the box pleat I had initially pinned into it. And I think that, if I remember correctly, my professor, who talked a lot about philosophies of trim and so forth, if I remember correctly, he recommended that on millinery trim, for something like this, if you have all your pleats going one direction on a ribbon ornament, that on the other end you pin them all going the opposite direction so that you get interesting variation in the highlights that pop up on that piece of ribbon trim. And so I'm doing that now. It's harder than you think to pin pleats into a ribbon like this. Just to get them to balance nicely is difficult. And it's especially to circle back to what I was talking about when I was bemoaning the days of sewing 20 million masks a day. I feel like that has maybe adversely impacted my ability to put pleats into something in an aesthetically pleasing way that is not reminiscent of a surgical mask. Because my instinct to make things symmetrical and balanced was really served well by the sewing of surgical masks, because they have a uniform number of pleats on both sides and they need to line up and they need to be symmetrical. And boy, was I good at that part of mask making. But I would argue that perhaps it did not serve me well with respect to creating millinery trim, because now that's my instinct, and that's not a good way to do a little piece of ribbon trim like this. I think I'm my own fashion sense is tripping up my ability to show you guys what I'm working on here, because I've always got on a dark colored outfit and I'm working on a dark colored piece of ribbon, and so there's no contrast behind it for you to see what's happening with those pleats there. But suffice it to say that I am pretty pleased with how this has turned out, and I think I'm going to create the other one with all the pleats going in the exact opposite direction, since they are going to sort of be mirrored on this hat around this large red floral ornament here, which, again, because I'm streaming on two platforms with two different devices, I have difficulty showing things in such a way that both cameras get it equally. And I feel like the audience that I am serving less well here is my Instagram audience, which if you guys would like to pop over to YouTube and jump on this stream here, that's really kind of where I'm directing my attention. Primarily, this is my first time streaming on Instagram. I have no idea how this is going to work. I mean, I can see that it's live, but anyway, maybe it'll work out, or maybe it'll be something that I watch the stream after the fact and I'm like, that was not helpful. Really just looking for other audiences. You know, I have a certain number of followers on Instagram that I would love to have attend or, you know, tune into this streamed open studio time. And I'm not necessarily sure that they spend much time on YouTube as a platform, and vice versa. So, you know, just trying things out here. I'm relatively new at streaming. I took a workshop called Streaming for Artists Boot Camp with a local woman who had recently, she's a theater person like I am. She had been the managing or the marketing director at a company in Raleigh called Theater Raleigh. And obviously then when the pandemic closed down all the theaters, several of those folks whose jobs are tied to there being performances that need to be marketed or need to be publicized and so forth. In many cases, people lost their jobs, which is sad. But Mickey, who was the former marketing director at Theater Raleigh, had experience as a streamer just on her own reconnaissance. I think what she primarily does is streams like cosplays and games, like playing video games. Anyway, she wound up consulting with the Women's Theater Festival in Raleigh on how to turn their in-person theater festival into something that could be streamed. Hang on, I need to actually brain about this. I'm trying to create an opposite thing to that. So I think okay. This is hard. I didn't think about how difficult this was going to be. But it'll be worth it. The trim when I'm done, I'm absolutely, not absolutely, let's say I'm 80% sure that it's going to be really awesome. But I can't guarantee that. So trying to pin it out here so that each one is a mirror image of the other. And now I will finish my spiel about Mickey and the workshop that I took with her. So she helped Theater Raleigh move their whole festival online. And I think they streamed their shows on a platform called Twitch. And that went so successfully that she decided to put together a workshop to help teach other artists how to adapt their work to a streaming sort of paradigm in this time when none of us can be together safely. Hey, Mickey's in the chat. Woo! Yay! Welcome. I was just talking about your boot camp workshop and the Women's Theater Festival and how you put that workshop together, and it really sort of jump-started my interest in moving my studio, in conducting this open studio every Thursday. Mickey says in the chat, hello, how are you doing today? I'm doing well. I'm doing good. I'm double streaming today on YouTube, but also I have my phone over here at a sort of oblique angle and streaming on Instagram. So I'm hoping that maybe some folks who are, for whatever reason, not going to catch me on YouTube might check out the stream on Instagram and then become a second new audience. I don't know. Seemed like a good idea at the time. Well, it seems like a good idea right now because it's what I'm doing it. And when today's stream is over, I'll check out how this Instagram video turned out and whether it's anything that I think I want to continue in the future. OMG, double streaming. Well, yeah, it is really exciting. And this is, I know that Streamlabs OBS as a streaming software will allow me to concurrently stream in, I think it's YouTube and Twitch, maybe. Mickey will have to chime in on the chat and clarify that, because I'm certainly not the expert here. But the other platforms on which you can stream via Streamlabs OBS are not spaces where I feel like my primary audiences for this would be found. And if people are going to serendipitously discover my stream, I think it's more likely that they would do that because they already follow me on Instagram and are like, oh, she's live, let me check it out. Or see after the fact that I have a video on IGTV. So that's why I decided to set up my phone to stream both of these. And we'll see how it goes. So I've now completed the pinning out. Let me put my needle in the pin cushion here. Completed the pinning out of my 2 ornaments that are going to go on the Tim Burton pirate bicorne situation here. And now I want to secure down these pleats in the ribbon and assemble these ribbon confections before I stitch them onto the hat. Because if I were to pin them onto the hat and then stitch them through and through to the hat as I was stabilizing the pleats I've pinned out, then if I get it all on there and I'm like, well, I love it, but it needs to move an inch to the left, then I'd have a whole mess of stuff to remove and re-sew. And in this case, I will create a little independent ornament that I will only tack onto that hat once I figure out exactly where I want it to go. And it's just, in the long term, like I do that in theater, of course, because we are often retrimming hats multiple times for multiple shows in the theater. But I mention it here because even when I'm making a hat for a contemporary client, a custom hat for somebody to just wear in their life, or in this case, a hat for, I'm not sure if this art exhibit, if the pieces are going to be sold or not. But just in case, I mean, I know they're going to be exhibited, and so it's the possibility exists that someone would see it and be like, okay, that Tim Burton pirate hat is definitely for me, I need it, and I would be, of course, selling it to them because I'd love to see somebody wearing this that was not me in there. I mean, I would wear it, but I'm saying, like, I would wear it, but I'd love to see another person who would wear it because then I would be like, let's be friends. Anyway, so the way that I'm securing these pleats, and I'm not even going to try to show it to you because there's no way you'll see it with matching thread on a shiny ribbon on a video screen and a live stream. Like, I could maybe take a photograph of this, but I'll just describe it to you because if you even, I don't think you even need to know anything about hats. Well, you need to know what a whip stitch is because I'm whip stitching the pleats on the underside of the fold. Remember back at the beginning of this stream when I showed you how I prepared these ribbons for this trim creation, and I put that fold into the flat end of them. So I'm using that fold as a way to secure down these pleats, yes, but also to hide my stitches because on the outside of the trim, we don't want to see any evidence of how a piece of decor has been stabilized. And my very first millinery professor, who was my very first millinery teacher, who was a professor at University of Tennessee, Knoxville, bless his heart, Bill Black. He just retired. I hope he has a lovely retirement. But he always had a phrase that he used when he described how trim should look so effortless and delicate. And I laugh every time I think of it, because he would say, the trimmings of that hat should look kissed together by angels. Yeah. And so I feel like maybe this hat is a little too gothic in its aesthetic to be kissed together by angels, but maybe they should be kissed together by succubi or something. We don't want to see the stitching is the ultimate end of that. And I've gone ahead and knotted my thread, gotten a knot in my thread, which is unfortunate. And hopefully I can. Yes, I think come on. I even waxed this with this special slidey. It's not beeswax, which is what I would use if I was at the costume shop. But it is this stuff that my partner got me when I was talking about how gross it was in a time of COVID to be licking my thread. And it's a fingertip moistener for hygienic sorting papers quickly. But I used it like beeswax. In a costume shop, you run your thread through across beeswax in order to get it to knot up in itself like that when you hand sew. So I think I've stabilized the first of these 4 sets of pleats. Yes, I have, and I've put my glasses on because it seems like there might be talking happening in the chat. I love it better here on YouTube than Instagram. Heads Jim Millinery. Hey, it's good to see you. She is one of my followers. I don't even know your actual name. And maybe it's Nar, because that's what your name says in the chat here. And I believe you are in Nigeria. Is that correct? I know you're in an Arabic country. I love the fact that somebody is viewing what I'm doing from another nation, another continent. That's really exciting. Especially since, like, my original goal for this was just that the only people that would be watching it would probably be my students in my class, which they all live here in the same town as me. And I see that Mickey has clarified what is going on with streaming multiple places in Streamlab, which, again, she taught my streaming workshop and knows much more about the whole topic of streaming than I perhaps ever will, because I'm enjoying doing this, and there was a conference this past weekend in which Mickey hosted a panel of myself and a couple of my classmates, and I think a woman who was not part of our class but was involved with the streaming of the Women's Theater Festival. And that panel discussion was about how many of us practice artistic disciplines that maybe are not as easily practiced without an audience, and how streaming can provide you with that audience. And just sort of talking about our different journeys. And at the end of the panel, Mickey asked us all about whether we thought we would continue to stream. And I'm not satisfied with the answer that I gave, because I think, I was being very mindful of the fact that my day job is to work at a theater, and as soon as that theater is able to produce live shows again, I will, of course, go back to my job. I guess if they want me to come back there and breathe COVID from our audience members, I wouldn't. But, I'm trying to be optimistic, saying that they would make a good choice in how they reopened, and I would then have those job obligations. And I couldn't necessarily do a stream every week at 3 p.m. on Thursday, because I would be in my studio at work. And I don't know if they would be cool with me streaming from the university, because there's a lot of, there's a lot of red tape with the idea of filming students and, putting them on your channel or whatever. But that's all to say that I do think I will still continue to stream live studio time in some way. Um, the time may change. It may turn into something that I do every Saturday afternoon, or a weekend day, or it may be something that that takes a different form. But I am finding this open studio stream to be so gratifying in the sense that it is a way of creating community among international milliners, which is a very good example that I have my Instagram friend from an Arabic nation here that we would never be interacting in real time in a time before the internet and streaming technologies. And so I would not want to give up that opportunity. And it's been fun. So I've stabilized my pleats on this ribbon ornament, and I am tacking it into the shape that I hope it's the right shape. I won't know till I pin it on my hat over here. But I think it's the right shape. I'm having some thread issues again. But yes. Yeah, I'm going to tie this off and pin it on there and make sure that it is the ornament that I want it to be before I do stabilize the other one and finish this hat off. And it looks like I have 8 minutes left to my stream. So, as with most things, I have these grand ambitions of what I'm going to achieve in the course of an open studio hour, and it winds up being not even half that. But it's okay. Because I'm achieving, speaking about millinery philosophy, I'm achieving demonstrating techniques, and I'm enjoying spending time with you guys, even though many of you are just sitting there watching and not participating in the chat. That is completely fine, because I know that some people sign on from their own millinery studios and have their own projects in hand, and they don't necessarily have the time or the desire to be commenting on what's happening here. So this is my ribbon that's going to get that's not good. I'll show you what I'm looking at here in a minute once I get it pinned onto here. Okay, I actually think this is going to work. Ooh, that's my needle. I need a pin, not a needle. I think this is going to work. I'm going to pin it into place, and I think I'm going to be pleased with this and want to do stabilize my other one, which I think would be, I'm going to wait until next week. I don't think my friends are going to host another sewing circle thing, but even if they do, I think I will wait on that so that I can maintain this as maintain the continuity of this project as a stream specific project. All right, so take a look at that, and we're going to have this little guy, this big red hydrangea right there, and then this same configuration of ribbon, which the thought is that it looks like the other half of a bow if you were to see this hat completed straight on from this side, even though you wouldn't wear it that way. You wear it to the, with the fin to the side, and all this trim is going to be on this side. But yes, I think that this is a very good illustration too of how my mentor's theory that you put your pleats going one way on the ribbon and the other way on the back side of the fold creates a lot of visual interest and dimensionality, especially in in the case of this ribbon, which is satin, and so we've got highlights popping up on the folds of it, that this is a better way to go than if we gathered it, or if we had our pleats all going in the same direction. We wouldn't have this richness of tone and dimensionality to the ribbon. So, well, I have 5 minutes left. I could start the other one. I don't know. I mean, when this hat is done, it's been a long time coming. I started this hat, originally did the spiral braid construction and configuration years ago. I mean, and it's been sitting pinned out on a head in my studio, first in my old studio, and now here in this studio in the intervening time. And my old studio, I closed it up like a year ago, and didn't access anything in there for a while. Because I'm talking about my old home studio versus my studio here in this home. Of course, my studio at work is very different and huge and full of, other people as well. So I'm not speaking about that. Pre-COVID, I went to that studio every day. I think I need a new length of thread. There's not enough here. Nar says in the chat, I thought as much, it's half of a bow. I love it, and the pleats did justice to that. I'm glad that because I can see it here with me sitting next to it, but I'm glad to hear that the lighting is good enough. And I can tell on my Instagram screen that the lighting is good enough. It's picking up the lighting, but it's hard to tell on the Streamlabs. The way the angle of my laptop's screen is, I can't tell if you're getting as good of a view of it. But I'm glad to hear that it is coming off as something that you can see what I'm talking about, and you don't have to just imagine it. Yay! Successful demonstration. I don't know if any of my students have made it today, but I get the idea that they're only allowed to sign up for time in the studio at work in staggered shifts and limited population. I think only 3 people can safely be in there at a time. So I think most of them wind up accessing this after the fact, because if they are able to sign up for studio time on Thursday, they don't want to spend that time watching me blather when they have so much homework to do with access to the dress forms there and so forth. So I don't actually, I guess that first stream, a couple of them did show up. First and second stream, a couple of them did show up. But I think most of them are probably accessing it after the fact. And it seems like that as I go on with this, that most of my audience has wound up being fellow milliners, either professional milliners working as fashion hat makers contemporarily, or fellow theatrical milliners like Denise Wallace-Spriggs, who was here, I think she was here last week. She was definitely here for my first stream. And Denise is a very special person to me in that she is the first theatrical milliner to whom I was apprenticed back in, when did I work? 1998, 99, I believe. Somewhere I have the t-shirt from that theater season that I can confirm those dates, but I believe it was 1998, 99 at the Huntington Theater in Boston. And I started out there as a first hand to a draper, Anita Kanzian, who is a very talented draper. And I enjoyed being her first hand, and we got along really well. But I always knew that what I wanted to do in terms of theatrical costume production was crafts. So it was entirely no shade towards Anita that I really wanted to move to be Denise's assistant. And at some point they had a show with a huge number of hats, and they shifted me from Anita's team to the craft team. And I learned so much from Denise about millinery and also about covering parasol frames. It was as her assistant that I